Hi, I'm Dr. George Yancey. Let's shatter some paradigms. And the paradigm I want to share today concerns Christians as the majority group. Now, as a sociologist, I need to explain what I mean by majority group. I'm not talking about sheer numbers. The way we define majority group in sociology is the group that has disproportionate power. So, for example, in South Africa, for many years, even though whites were a numerical minority, they were the majority group because they had more power. The average white had much more power in South Africa. So when whites have more power than blacks, they have a majority group, regardless of their numbers. So I'm not talking about whether Christians outnumber other groups. Now, we can look at the fact that Christians are declining in numbers in the United States, and one day they may be a numerical minority group, but that's not what is important. When we talk about power, what are we talking about? Generally speaking, when social scientists talk about power, they look at a number of dimensions. Most commonly, they look at things such as economic power, cultural power, political power. So the argument is that Christians, a majority group, have more power per capita, politically, economically, and culturally. I think historically, this has been the case. Historically, it was to your economic advantage to be a Christian. The cultures catered to Christians, so there's more cultural power. And politically, it was hard to get political office if you're not thought of as being a decent Christian person. It was harder. It wasn't impossible, but it was harder. So when you think about it, historically, I think it was fair to talk about Christians as a majority group. But is it fair today? So let's look at each one of these. And one more thing. I want to talk about this in part because part of the justification of Christianophobia has been that Christians are the majority group. Therefore, we don't have to be concerned about how we treat Christians to a certain degree. They have the power. They're the oppressor. Others are the oppressed. Now, this touches into identity politics. And identity politics, you have the oppressor and the oppressed. And Christians are the oppressors because they're the majority group. They have more power. They have more cultural power, more political power, more economic power. Is that true today? So let's look at this. By the way, I wrote an article on this, a peer review article, which I'm going to post in the description. So you can take a look at. It's a little bit more academic, but it makes the same basic point. So first, economically. Are Christians economically more powerful than other groups? And when we look at the economic breakdown, looking at per capita, the answer is no. We're about average. There are groups that are, such as Hindus, that have higher education, per capita have more economic power. There are groups that are below Christians. But we're probably about in the middle. Now, Christianophobia really is about conservative Christians, though, right? The hostilities towards conservative Christians. So how are they doing? And actually, conservative Christians do a little bit worse. Not dramatically worse, but a little bit worse than average. We look at economic power. We look at socioeconomic status. We look at educational attainment. Conservative Christians don't do quite as well as the average. So looking at per capita, per person, no. Christians are not a majority group economically. They may be numerically, but that's not what really matters at this point in time. Culturally. Well, if you look at my work on Christianophobia, you know that culturally, we look at things such as academia, media, the arts. When academia and media, and I have posted videos on this, Christians are at a disadvantage. They're underrepresented, first of all. You know, one of the things about having power is you're overrepresented. We talk about men being overrepresented as CEOs, for example. Well, Christians are underrepresented in academia. They're underrepresented in the media, the news media. And what we do find out, we look at the media, is that the images of Christians is not a positive one. When we look at academia, we see there's a hostility towards Christians as far as hiring, and I would argue in the sort of research that we do. And one of the reasons why I touch on things such as Christian nationalism is I think it's a great example of a theory that kind of is born out of a sort of a animosity towards Christians when there's alternative ways of looking at things. And as I've shown in other videos, the scale used is not very good. So culturally, I would actually argue that Christians are not in the majority group. If anything, they're in the minority group in that they don't have power. They have less per capita power culturally. I don't know much work in the arts, but my guess from looking at the arts is that conservative Christians do not have a lot of power in the traditional arts. We create our own artwork, you want to say that, that's fine. But the mainstream artwork, I would not think of traditional Christians, conservative Christians, as having a lot of power. Politically, many people will come back and say, look, you conservative Christians, you got your president, Donald Trump. Now, as an aside, he's not my choice for president. But I will concede that conservative Christians supported Trump and he's not president. And the Republicans, who they tend to support, control both houses. So you can say right now, conservative Christians do have power. Christians, if they support Republicans, do have power. But what about a few years ago, when the Democrats controlled the White House and both houses? You see, this sort of political power is temporary. It's temporary to the party in office. It's not like Christians have so much power that they control both major parties. And I would even argue that the Republican Party today is not the Republican Party of, say, 10 or 20 years ago. Because of Trump, this is a more secular Republican Party. Think of the major leaders of this party, the major influencers of this party, people like Musk, Joe Rogan. Not people who are known for their Christian faith. And I think that there's going to be some more work done. I'm not planning on doing it myself, but I think there's going to be some more work done. And keep an eye on it, showing the secularization of the Republican Party. Yes, they still care about abortion to a certain extent, but although more and more pro-choice people are getting power. They care about moral issues to a certain extent, but not as much. I think Trump helped to deal with some of that. Because supporting Trump, it's hard to care about moral issues, but I won't go too much into that. So I think even though Christians do have some say in the Republican Party, and the Republican Party is the party in power right now, I'd be careful in thinking that this shows that Christians have permanent political advantage. I will concede that there could be some per capita power among Christians politically, but it's not as overwhelming as it once was. So overall, I don't think that Christians are a majority group today, if we're looking at it the way we're supposed to be looking at it as per capita power. This is something that was true historically, no doubt, but it's not true today. When we use what's happened historically to interpret today, we sometimes make mistakes. And part of the problem of people who say Christians are the majority group, they're the oppressors, therefore they must be fought, is that there are situations where that is not the case, when Christians do not have that power, when they could technically be part of the oppressed. One could argue that Christians in academia, in the media, as a minority status, face some of the oppressive types of norms that we see with other groups. And an accurate realization of the positions of Christians and the relative power they have can help us get a better view of our society and decide the directions we need to go. Does this share some paradigms? Paradigms to think about Christians as the majority group? You may have been told that. You've been told about things such as Christian privilege and all these advantages. And I'm not denying that there's nothing to Christian privilege, but I think much of it is overblown because it assumes Christians have a majority status, which was true at one point, but no longer true. I hope this gives you something to think about. If it does, and you like it, and you want to comment on it, please do. If you disagree with me, please comment on it. Please like this channel. Helps get it out there. Please like this video. Consider subscribing. I'm a small content provider, But these things help keep me going and help me know my ideas are getting out there. So please consider doing these things. Thanks for coming. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you come back. We can shatter some more paradigms.